The heart monitor beside my bed started beeping, faster the second I heard my mother say it. Cancel the surgery. At first I thought I misunderstood her. I was lying flat under warm hospital blankets with IV lines taped into both arms, too weak to even sit up properly after months of liver failure treatment. Nurses had spent the last hour preparing me for emergency transplant surgery. They'd already shaved part of my arm for more lines. The surgeon had told me a donor was finally available. Then my mother folded her arms and looked directly at the doctor. "We're not paying for this anymore." The room went silent except for the machines. "Mom," my voice cracked instantly. "What are you talking about?" The surgeon glanced between us carefully. "Mrs. Carter, if payment authorization is withdrawn this late, we legally cannot proceed." I felt cold all over. "No, please," I whispered. "You said we were approved, you told me everything was handled." My mother wouldn't look at me. "We can't afford this," she said flatly. "Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for updates." I tried pulling myself upright, but pain shot through my stomach. "I'll die if they stop." A nurse near the wall lowered her eyes. The surgeon stepped closer to my mother. "Your daughter may not survive another delay." My mother tightened her grip on a thick folder pressed against her chest. "Cancel it," she repeated. And then she turned toward the door while I begged her not to leave me there. The nurse near my bed spoke softly. "Are you absolutely certain?" My mother answered without turning around. "Yes." She reached for the door handle. Then a man's voice cut through the hallway. "Wait, the procedure has been fully covered." Everyone froze. The doors opened slowly, and a sharply dressed older man stepped inside beside the hospital administrator. The second my mother saw him, the color drained from her face. "You told me she never found him," the man said. My mother stopped walking and slowly turned around. I stared at the stranger, confused and exhausted as nurses suddenly moved again around the room. One of them immediately stepped toward the surgeon. "Oh, our team is ready if we're proceeding," she said quickly. The stranger nodded once. "You are." "Who is he?" I asked weakly. My mother snapped before anyone answered. "You need to leave." The man ignored her completely and looked at the surgeon instead. "Please continue preparing her." Something about the way he spoke made everyone listen. Even the hospital administrator looked nervous. "Mom," I said slowly, "what's happening?" She finally looked at me, but not like a mother looking at her daughter. She looked trapped. "You don't understand," she said. The stranger stepped closer to my bed. "No," he replied quietly, "she doesn't." My mother's expression hardened instantly. "This is none of your business, Marcus." So that was his name. Marcus looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. "She deserves the truth before you bury it again." The room became painfully quiet. I looked between them, completely lost. "What truth?" I whispered. Neither of them answered me. But for the first time since my illness started, I realized my mother wasn't afraid of losing money. She was afraid of him. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his coat, while my mother took a sharp step forward. "Don't," she warned. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Even the nurses stopped moving. Marcus ignored her and pulled out an old photograph with bent corners. He walked to my bedside and carefully placed it on the blanket beside my hand. I looked down at it. A much younger version of my mother stood beside Marcus outside what looked like a courthouse. In her arms was a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. My throat tightened. "What is this?" I asked. Before Marcus could answer, my mother lunged forward and snatched the photo away. She ripped it in half so fast the sound startled everyone in the room. "Enough," she shouted. The surgeon frowned. "Mrs. Carter, your daughter is under extreme stress right now. She doesn't need to hear his lies." Marcus finally looked directly at me. "I've been paying your hospital bills for 6 years." The words hit harder than anything else in the room. I stared at him, completely stunned. "What?" "That's not true," my mother snapped immediately. "He's manipulating you." But now pieces stopped making sense in my head. Every month my mother told me we were drowning in debt, every delayed treatment, every argument she had outside my hospital room pretending I couldn't hear. I looked at her slowly. You said nobody was helping us. She doesn't understand how complicated this is, my mother said quickly. No, Marcus replied, you made sure she never could. A nurse near the doorway exchanged a glance with another staff member. They clearly recognized his name, or maybe his face. Who are you? I asked him. Marcus hesitated just long enough to make my chest tighten again. My mother suddenly pointed toward the hallway. Call security, remove him now. The hospital administrator stepped forward carefully. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Vale's representative, has already cleared the outstanding balance. The name landed strangely in my head. Vale. I'd never heard it before, but my mother reacted instantly. Do not say that name around her, she hissed. Marcus looked back at me with visible disappointment. Ask your mother why she changed your last name. The room fell silent again. I slowly turned toward my mother. And for the first time in my life, she looked away from me first. By the time the nurses wheeled my bed into the administrative hallway, half the floor already knew something was wrong. My mother's voice echoed off the walls before we even reached the elevators. This man has been stalking our family for years. Patients, relatives turned to stare. Nurses froze at their stations. A woman holding flowers stepped aside as my bed rolled past. Marcus stayed calm beside the hospital administrator, while my mother pointed at him like she was trying to force everyone onto her side. You abandoned us, she shouted. Now you suddenly show up pretending to save her. Marcus finally answered. I only found out she was hospitalized 3 weeks ago. That's a lie. You blocked every attempt to contact her. The hallway went quiet. I looked back and forth between them, feeling like my entire life was being argued over in public while I lay helpless in the middle of it. The hospital administrator opened a file tablet nervously. Mrs. Carter, there are also questions regarding redirected assistance payments connected to your daughter's treatment. My mother's face changed instantly. What does that mean? I asked. Nobody answered fast enough. A nurse near my bed spoke carefully. Several emergency support grants were approved months ago. I blinked at her, approved. She nodded slowly. I felt sick for an entirely different reason now. There had been nights my mother sat beside my bed crying, telling me we couldn't afford additional treatments. Times she said specialists refused to help us because we had no money left. But if funding had already existed. I looked at her. You told me they denied everything. My mother's breathing became uneven. I did what I had to do. Marcus stared at her coldly. To survive what? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. 2 hospital legal staff members stepped out of the elevator at that exact moment. One approached my mother carefully. Mrs. Carter, we need you to remain available while financial records are reviewed. You can't be serious, she snapped. She tried stepping around them toward the elevator anyway. Security quietly moved in front of the doors. That was when I noticed it. My mother didn't look angry anymore. She looked terrified. Marcus's phone buzzed in his hand. He checked the screen, and for the first time since arriving his composure cracked. He looked directly at me. There's one thing your mother never expected you to find out. Before he could continue, my mother shouted. No. The consultation room beside the operating wing felt smaller every second the clock kept moving. A transplant coordinator stood near the door checking her watch repeatedly, while surgeons moved in and out of the hallway outside. We are running out of time, she warned. If surgery doesn't begin soon, the organ will be reassigned. My stomach twisted. Marcus stood across from me, while my mother sat rigidly in the corner, clutching the same folder against her chest, like it was the only thing holding her together. You deserve the truth, Marcus said carefully. I looked at him, then tell me who you are. He exhaled slowly. I'm not your father. For some reason, that answer still hurt. I was your father's lawyer, he continued, and his closest friend. The room went still. Your father's name is Adrian Vale. I stared at him blankly while pieces from earlier replayed in my head. The administrator calling him Mr. Vale's representative. My mother panicking when the name was mentioned. Marcus continued carefully. Adrian has been paying for your medical care through a private trust since you were 13. I looked at my mother instantly. She wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew about me, I whispered. Yes. The word barely left Marcus's mouth before my mother snapped back. He gave up on us years ago. No, Marcus said firmly, you disappeared. Silence crushed the room. Marcus explained everything quickly now, like time itself was pushing the conversation forward. Adrian believed my mother left because she wanted distance after their relationship collapsed. He spent years trying to locate us. Every time financial assistance required direct disclosure, my mother rejected it. Suddenly everything connected. The changed surname. The hidden paperwork. The delayed treatments. The cancelled surgery. I looked at my mother slowly. You knew he was trying to help me. Her eyes filled immediately. You don't understand what kind of people his family are. That's not what I asked. She looked down. I turned back toward Marcus. Where is he now? Marcus hesitated. And that hesitation scared me more than anything else. My mother suddenly broke. He came here this morning, she blurted out. I froze. What? He's here, she whispered. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He was preparing legal sponsorship paperwork, he admitted. Once he signed, your treatment authority would legally transfer away from your mother. I looked at her in disbelief. That was why she stopped the surgery. Not because she couldn't pay. Because she was losing control. Voices outside the open consultation room suddenly quieted. Nurses and staff had clearly overheard enough to understand what was happening. My mother noticed too. He would have taken you away from me, she said desperately. The surgeon stepped into the doorway sharply. We need to move now. Another 10 minutes and this organ is gone. Then footsteps approached behind him. Heavy, fast. I turned toward the doorway just as a man stopped there, breathing hard like he'd run through the entire hospital. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then the word slipped out before I could stop it. Dad. The man standing in the doorway looked like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, his hair was damp from rain outside, but the second our eyes met, everything else in the room disappeared. I saw it immediately. The same dark eyes. The same sharp jawline. Even the way he held his breath looked familiar somehow. My mother turned away before he even stepped fully inside. Adrian Vale looked at me like he was trying to memorize every detail at once. Lenshina, he said softly. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. For 19 years I thought my father abandoned me before I was old enough to remember him. Every birthday, every school event, every hospital stay, I believed he simply never wanted me. And now he was standing 3 feet away looking like he'd tear the entire building apart just to keep me alive. I'm sorry, he said immediately, voice breaking. I'm so sorry it took me this long to find you. My mother let out a shaky breath. Don't do this. Adrian finally looked at her. You told her I disappeared. You were going to take her from me. I was trying to see my daughter. The room stayed silent, except for distant hospital activity outside. Marcus stepped forward carefully and explained the rest clearly while the transplant team continued preparing nearby. Years earlier, my mother learned Adrian's wealthy family wanted legal custody discussions after their relationship collapsed. Terrified of losing control over me, she left without warning, changed my last name, and cut every connection she could find. At first, Adrian believed she simply wanted distance. Then months became years. When private investigators finally located us, my mother accepted anonymous trust payments tied to my care, but hid where the money came from. She redirected portions of charitable support through accounts under her control, while continuing to tell everyone we were alone and desperate. And when my illness became critical, she realized surgery sponsorship paperwork would expose everything. So she tried to stop it. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to deny it.
She didn't.
Instead, tears rolled silently down her face.
I didn't want to lose you, she whispered.
I could barely process the sentence.
Lose me.
I was the one lying in a hospital bed begging not to die while she walked away. The hospital administrator stepped into the room holding several documents. Mrs. Carter, he said carefully. Hospital fraud investigators and social services have been notified. 2 security officers appeared behind him. My mother looked around the room desperately, but nobody moved to defend her now. Not the nurses who once comforted her. Not the administrators. Not even me. She clutched the folder tighter. Lenshina. I didn't answer. One officer gently asked her to surrender the financial records voluntarily. When she refused, they escorted her out while she continued crying quietly. She stopped once at the doorway and looked back at me. But I couldn't look at her anymore. The second she disappeared down the hallway, the surgeon stepped beside my bed. We have to go now. Adrian moved instantly to my side as nurses unlocked the wheels beneath my bed. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't looking around terrified. I was looking straight ahead. Adrian held my hand the entire way to the operating room. You're going to be okay, he kept saying quietly. And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. 3 months later, I stood on the hospital rooftop garden under warm afternoon sunlight. The surgery had worked. Recovery was brutal, but I was alive. Actually alive. I'd started community college classes again part-time. My strength was slowly returning. Some mornings I still woke up expecting hospital monitors and IV alarms, but then I'd remember I could breathe without pain now. Below the rooftop windows, I spotted Adrian downstairs arguing nervously with one of my doctors about whether I was eating enough protein. I laughed before I could stop myself. Marcus had warned me Adrian worried too much. Turns out he was right. The investigations into my mother were still ongoing. Fraud charges, redirected assistance funds, falsified disclosures. Extended family members who once praised her devotion stopped speaking to her after learning what happened. She tried contacting me several times. I wasn't ready. Maybe someday I would be. Maybe not. I walked slowly toward the same rooftop railing where I'd once stood during physical therapy after surgery. Back then, I remembered begging my mother not to leave me in that hospital bed. Now I understood something that changed everything. The person who fought hardest to keep me alive was the person I'd been kept away from my entire life. I closed my eyes as warm wind moved across the rooftop garden. And for the first time in years, my future finally felt like it belonged to me. The day my mother tried to end my future was the same day I finally got my life back.